Good afternoon, welcome to the second Telepost game of the week, presented by myself and what I can only describe as thoroughly out of control hair. This game is one of mine, and it's between myself and Mark Smith. This took place in the Shropshire League, playing for the Telepost C team, during quite a tough season where I think all of our players have been playing up most games. So the game started. I'm on the white side. Mark Smith's on the has the black pieces, and the game started with the Spanish opening. So this is all normal stuff. Okay, and here's the first real decision point. So here the martial move order is castle c3 d5. Mark opts to go into the closed Spanish. After c3, castles h3. Mark deviates from theory first. Though the main line is rook e8, d4, bishop f8, knight bd2. So that was what I was hoping to go into. After queen d7, which is obviously not an invalid move, but maybe... but, you know, the queen isn't particularly well placed on this square, and so white should just be happy to continue with the main line, basically, but with a slightly better position than he would otherwise have. So after d4, rook e8. When I was preparing, I saw this Fiddler game where he repeated once in a similar position. This is a... So after rook e8, knight g5, attacking the f7 square. There is a very common threefold repetition in the Zaitsev variation that looks kind of like this, where black just plays rook f8, knight f3, rook e8, knight g5, and you know, the players shake hands. I wasn't planning to force the repetition, but I thought repeating once is, you know, nice thing to do, applies a little bit of pressure. And my opponent reacted quite badly to this with knight d8. Obviously, while this covers the f7 square, the knight being here disconnects the rooks, and consequently white can take advantage of this with my next move, which was a4. After h6, knight f3, ejecting the knight. So essentially what my opponent should play here, I think, and I think it's the only move really, is bishop b7. At which point, you know, at least the bishop defends the rook. There is a possibility that you'll end up with the bishop unhappily anchored on a8 in some variations after, say, this, where the bishop loses quite a lot of time if it ever wants to return to... Like, the bishop in the corner doesn't have any sideways mobility, so not only can it sometimes get attacked from both directions, but also it's just much less effective, I think, than a bishop on, say, b7 is, or c6. So instead of that, Mark continued with a sort of fairly normal move in these kind of positions, bishop f8, but unfortunately here it meets a tactical problem. So I'm just going to scroll a little bit and hopefully, yeah. So this is an opportunity for sort of a spot the tactics moment. So if you want to pause the video and have a look, what would you play as white in this position? Okay, so continuing with this, the move I played was a takes b5. And there are several sort of tactical points with this. None of the lines are especially deep, but they all deserve a little bit of, you need to consider all of them. So after a takes b5, rook takes a8, white is straight up winning here. Very common tactical motif that you'll see in e.g. the queen b6 variation in the London, for instance. Very common across a lot of openings. And after queen takes b5, then white has the move bishop a4, skewering the queen and the rook. So again, the queen on d7 hasn't really been earning its keep here. Okay, after bishop b7, which I think was the best response at this point, b takes a6, and white has simply won a pawn. So here, there is sort of a further note which I had foreseen. So after bishop takes e4, where black attempts to regain his pawn, this unfortunately doesn't quite work out. So d takes e5, and we're threatening the knight here, so you can't simply ignore the threat. Obviously after d takes e5, queen takes d7, knight takes d7, rook takes e4 would win the bishop. So instead, Mark plays one intermezzo, bishop f3. But then after queen f3, the rook on a8 is hanging. Again, this undefended rook, because of the knight coming back to the d8 square to sort of passively defend the f7 square. So after this, black doesn't have the tempo to immediately recapture on e5. Instead, black plays c6, and here there's a spectacular blunder that white's able to make. You can play e takes f6, but that falls to rook takes e1, check. And there was also a very strong continuation for white, which I missed at this point. Bishop takes h6, and then after g takes, queen takes f6. And white's position is simply dominating here. Nonetheless, in the game continuation after bishop f4, white is still up. Plenty of material, he's up 2 pawns. His pieces are all pretty good, except for the knight on b1. And yeah, this is a very pleasant position to be playing. So here, after bishop f4, d takes e5. And the sensible thing here, I think, would have been to, say, take on e5 with the rook. Or maybe even probably with the rook rather than the bishop. At which point, it's very hard to see what black can do to avoid a simplification and slowly losing the game. And instead of this, I'd just noticed that I'd missed this move last turn and decided to play it now. I think this was a bit of a psychological error. It's not a bad move, but it is one that I was basically playing because I was annoyed at myself for having missed it previously. And here it's not as strong, it is much more unclear. So e4 is a strong reply. This intermezzo here. Queen f4. And in the game I was very worried about bishop d6. But actually this isn't too bad, because after white plays queen g5, black is forced to return to f8 in order to preserve the bishop. This is sort of a difficult position because the bishop remains sort of stuck on h6. The engine is of the view that this works out for white, but it's a lot more unclear, I would say, than we needed it to be. So, however, my opponent replied with knight e6, and here I was very happy to just simplify. Bishop takes e6, rook takes, bishop g5, just getting out of any potential trouble, bishop d6, queen comes across to h4, and after queen c8, threatening this pawn on a6, I think I made a very good practical decision to play knight d2, which kind of acknowledges that white's problem is not that, you know, being 2 pawns up, he doesn't have enough material advantage. White's problem is that his development is a little bit of a liability, his rooks aren't connected, and this knight is not in the game yet. So I think this was a good pawn sacrifice. So after rook takes, queen takes a6, now bishop takes f6, and yes, here g takes f6, rook takes f6, this basically transposes. You play sort of this line. So instead, g takes f6 is an interesting try. And yeah, after g takes f6, white takes the opportunity to take the pawn. King f8. And yeah, now just f3. Obviously, if white gets ludicrously greedy for some reason, then that would in fact be checkmate. So yeah, after f3, we're just defending the rook on e1. We're cementing the knight in this nice central square. And again, we're now threatening to simplify into a completely winning queen endgame. Black's double pawns here mean even if the material is allowed to get a little bit closer, it should be very, very difficult for black to even imagine holding this. So after queen b6 check, king h1, king e7, obviously if queen takes b2, just knight takes d6. And you can't recapture with the rook because queen h8 is checkmate. So yeah, king h1, king e7, and then knight d6 anyway, rook takes e1, queen takes, king takes, queen d2 check. And white has simplified into, out of that sort of very tactical Spanish middle game, into a clear endgame, 2 pawns up, much better structure, outside passed pawn. Queen endgames are always a little frustrating to be playing a lot of the time, but really they're not usually very difficult to win compared to, say, a knight endgame or something like that. And yeah, if you're not confident you can win this position, well, at my level, if I'm not confident I can win this position, it's like, why turn up, right? So after queen d2 check, king e6, b4. And the idea here kind of is that the queen wants to control the bases of the pawn chain. Or at least this is how I was sort of conceiving the position. So if my queen controls the base of the pawn chain, then, you know, black's queen can never really make inroads. And then I want my king, queen and pawns to control as many central squares as possible, because anytime the queens get traded off, the pawn endgame is such a trivial win that, you know, it's immediately resignable. So here, after b4, queen b5, again, the only thing you're really trying to avoid is some sort of situation with a perpetual. So I played queen e1 check here, just to prevent the queen from penetrating. Queen b8. Start advancing the pawns. And yeah, here it's sort of just technical conversion, bringing the king in. Queen c2 check. The king's moving actually to the centre. And yeah, having the queen on e1 means that if queen h2, for instance, we can even just play king f4 here. Oh no, we don't play queen f4, we play queen d2. And after the exchange of queens, white wins. So you can see that black has an increasingly sort of small number of squares. Again, this helps that black's own king is extremely weak, so I don't even have to like use the king to escort a pawn up, use the queen to escort a pawn up the board. So here we're just expanding our control of the board. There's not really a lot of opportunities for black to threaten any kind of perpetual. Obviously, if queen e5, king f2. So after king f4, queen f1, we can now start attacking the black king ourselves. Continuing to push our pawns up, which forces the queen to keep an eye on them. And after queen c4 here, the game is effectively over. So queen c5 and king d7. If black instead plays any other move, then white picks up this pawn with check. And after king d7, obviously we continue with our plan. Queen f5 check forces an exchange of queens because the queen attacks the black queen as well. And after those exchange, then this pawn is actually unstoppable now, pretty much. Yeah. So this is sort of a very nice example of how in those queen endgames where you do have the extra material, often what you're trying to do is control some space and exchange the queens to get a winning pawn endgame. Anyway, I was very pleased with how this game worked out and a lot of the decisions I made. Next time I think I'll be looking probably at the final round game in the Telepost Swiss between Mark and Rich. And yeah, if anyone has any games they would like to see me cover at any level within the club, do let me know and I'll be happy to take a look. Alright, thank you for watching and I'll see you next time.